Well, the rules. You should be giving me your attention exclusively. No crosstalk. Don't have private conversations between two people. I get to direct who gets to talk. Um, no arguing. If you don't like what I say, keep it to yourself. I don't expect you to agree with me. I don't agree with anybody, but I don't like to argue about stuff. It's just totally useless and not at all interesting. Do not enlighten me as to your own perspective on things. If even even if you can't resist it, put it in the form of a question at least. For this hour, only for this hour. Yeah, don't you think that? No, I don't think that. Not even remotely. uh, no damn cell phones. If I say something that's obviously factually incorrect, and you think it might be a good idea to fact check that, at least ask my permission, and 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 that's reasonable. But don't be doing some other damn thing on your cell phone when I'm giving my lecture. Oh, try not to go to sleep. Uh, in the old days, you would have been required to sit up straight, but I've given up on that. And the fact is, people's bodies are such that they need to move around. I'm okay with that. But I remember one night someone crawled over here in front of me, curled up, and went to sleep. What? That's impolite. Don't do that. The basic structure of the Gurdjieff work that had developed, in the generation from his. He tried a lot of different things, but what had what the first generation then of people who survived him had this kind of system for inner work, and it involved meeting together for an hour once a week. Everyone sits in a circle, and you have a table with a lamp and a book and a glass of water, and Mrs. Stavely, and nobody ever called her anything but Mrs. Stavely, sat and first read a bit from Gurdjieff's incomprehensible 3-inch book about aliens and Beelzebub. Very weird book. And then she would open it up for questions. And that, if you were going to get anything at all from the whole practice, you had to come with a question. And she was really good at it. I've never seen anybody else who answered people's questions and felt like they were speaking both from their own experience and seeing really what the person was asking for and giving it to them. She was really good at it, and I thought it was a beautiful technique. Now, I was really pretty good at asking questions. I'm still in. That's how I made my living for 25 years. This is the only time in my week, other than the 20 minutes in the Qigong classes, in which I turn it around and insist on being asked questions. Generally, when I have conversations with people, I ask all the questions, and I've always been pretty good at uh, uh, bringing out what interests me in a particular person. It's like, okay, what is it? What is it that I really am interested in that we might have in common? And ask a question about that both follows along with my own work or path or whatever, and also gives them a chance to talk about something they are interested in. I think it's a beautiful model, and the fact is, all the ancient texts are done that way. It's always a question and answer, uh, and I think it's the oldest and the best way to uh, transmit over generations. Uh, And it really makes it a triad, because you have to have someone who has a question, and you have to have someone who is willing to try to answer it, and that creates a magnetic force that then pulls down the energy. And that's been my experience with it. When I was 28, because I was so precocious in terms of asking questions, I was given the position of question answer in these groups. And what I found was, oh, when somebody asks you a question and you're tuned in, something comes through you. It's not some channeling of somebody else, but some energy comes through you that then gives you the answer that you never would have gotten just thinking about yourself. So it's a way in which one needs to be fed in this kind of practice. So I've been trying to get I've been trying to get a regular supply in that way, for some years, because at a certain point, you have to be able to eat in that way, as well as asking questions. So to get on with the Mrs. Stavely story, we bought this farm, this 35 acres out 20 minutes from here, 15 minutes from here, where we tore down all the buildings and built new ones. We built a house for Mrs. Stavely, a meeting room that we could gather in. We tore a barn apart completely and built a movements hall for Gurdjieff dances, which are a whole thing, and then a big kitchen and a place for food preservation, and then a whole print shop over here, and then we built a school for the children. So we had, it was a lot of people involved, and it was really an interesting community. And most people came just strictly for social purposes, and the fact that made them feel more spiritual, but they didn't actually do the exercises that were given that much. But there were some of us that did. There were some of us that were very intense and showed up for everything, every chance we got, and at a certain point, we had these Sunday work days, which start at 7:30 in the morning with sittings, and then a reading, and then an exercise, and then work that people did, and it would go all day till there was a reading, and like about 5, and then people would go home about 6. But there were some of us that would be staying there, working still, like in her kitchen, building her kitchen cabinets. It took a year, and she would get. It was getting too late to have a drink, and she liked to have a drink on Sunday nights. So she would invite the people who were around, people who were working there, because they were so totally gung ho, into her library, and we would sit and have drinks, and we would ask her different questions than we did in the regular groups that were much more stiff and formal, and she would tell us stories about Gurdjieff and her other people that she knew, and what her life had been like, and conflicts between people would come up fairly gently, and for some reason just be resolved in the good feelings of the moment. So there was not the kind of conflict that groups inevitably always have, just in those meetings, having a few drinks and snacks and questions and answer. It was kind of one of the major high points of my life, in terms of feeling in tune with a group of people and having it come into actuality, something I'd always fantasized about. These are people that you'd like worked together like all night, sometimes building different stuff, and you had very different personalities, and you maybe fell in love with their wife, and weird things happened, and stuff. It was life. So it was the group, the group and the group feeling, really in tune and functional, even though we were all, fairly. You could see very clearly the ways in which people were majorly fucked up.
But those Sunday nights is when it was like harmonious.
It felt like everything could be worked out, and that there's nothing else. There was no need to argue about anything. There was the conflict was gone that we maybe felt earlier in the day. When she wasn't there, people just argued and were fairly stupid. It was like a psychedelic. She was like a mild psychedelic in that way.
So sometimes on Sunday nights there's a lot of conflict. I've been involved in some of those major conflicts in the past. I don't know, what do you make of that, or what do you...
Well, there always is lots of conflicts if people spend time around each other.
If what you're trying to create here is something that you've experienced before, like kind of a high point in your life, when the conflicts here don't work out gently, which sometimes they don't, how do you...
Well,
I don't know, is that particularly painful for you?
It is particularly painful. And I think that's unavoidable. That's necessary suffering to really see how you are and how other people are. And that's the point of it, much more than making a new world that works better. Doing things that force people to work together under conditions in which your livelihood doesn't depend on it and you can quit. Creating that kind of a situation so that one can really see how one is the idea. Plus, the fact is you pull in external energies that make the whole thing alive. It's so odd, that's why chanting works so well. Any time a group of people does something together like that, it pulls in a kind of force that if you have something to do with it, it's really effective. And that whole process of going in to a group of people and really learning about people and going through stuff with them and seeing what happens and seeing how you react to it and how that's a reflection of something important that you need to understand, struggling with it and surviving, I think all of that is totally worthwhile.